I'm sitting here now, staring at the same blue walls I've been staring at since I was 13. They're covered with vintage movie posters, old friends, really, frozen in time, just like this room. It's been my sanctuary for as long as I can remember, nestled in the basement where I always had a sense of independence, even when I was a kid who had no business claiming it. This space was mine to shape, mine to own. I painted it, arranged it, made it my world. It was my escape from upstairs, my parents' world of rules and traditions. I've always been religious, but not in the way they wanted. Down here, I didn't need crosses on every wall, Bible verses framed on every shelf, or paintings of a solemn, judging Christ watching me from every angle. This was where I could breathe, where I could think. But now, it feels like this room might not just be my refuge. It might be my prison. Or worse, my tomb. I'm writing this because the weight of my thoughts feels like it's about to crush me. They're clawing at me, wild and untamed, like a beast hungry for blood. I need to get them out, to give them shape, to make sense of the senseless. Maybe then I'll find some peace, or at least understand why everything's gone so wrong. You see, my parents are the picture-perfect conservative Christians. They're like something out of a campaign ad, smiles plastered on, Bibles clutched tight, ready to declare family values at any given moment. My childhood Sundays were a blur of long, dreary sermons from a pastor whose eyes had this unsettling habit of wandering south. If you ever saw my mom and him in a conversation, you'd swear she thought he was admiring her cross necklace. Spoiler, he wasn't. The rest of my childhood is a haze of Bible study groups, potluck prayers, and more amens than I could ever count. Even now, when I see a plate of food hit the table, my hands instinctively fold in prayer like some Pavlovian response I can't shake. Not that I've seen a proper meal in a while, but that's another story. By the time I hit 16, I started to feel the walls closing in. While my friends were out soaking up the sun at the beach on Sundays, wearing bikinis that would have given my mom an aneurysm, I was stuck in a pew, suffocating under layers of expectation and judgment. It all came to a head one night a few months ago. My mom barged into my room unannounced, as if privacy was another one of those earthly sins she needed to save me from. "Are you questioning your faith?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut through my headphones. "No, Mom," I said, lying through my teeth. "I still believe. I just don't understand why I can't have faith and still do the things my friends do. Why can't I have both?" Her eyes narrowed, and I braced myself for what was coming next. Sure enough, she launched into one of her sermons, the kind that made me wonder if she secretly wanted to be a preacher. "Honey, on the day of judgment, we'll all have to account for our sins. This world fell the moment the serpent tricked Eve in the garden, and since then, we've been at war with our own sinful nature. We have to. Blah, blah, blah." I stopped listening somewhere around Fallen World. I knew if I didn't shut this down fast, I'd be trapped for hours. "You're right, Mom," I said, putting on my best repentant daughter act. I even reached out to squeeze her hand for extra effect. "I was just being tempted, but I won't let it happen again. You can trust me." Her face softened, and for a moment, I felt guilty. But only for a moment. "I do trust you, sweetheart," she said with a warm smile. "You know, I was young once, too. Believe it or not." She left me with a kiss on the forehead and a goodnight, and I knew I'd dodged a bullet. But I also knew I couldn't keep this up forever. Over the next few weeks, I tried to play the part, nodding along during sermons, pretending not to notice the pastor's wandering eyes, smiling through gritted teeth. But inside, something was shifting. Cracks were forming in my faith, and I couldn't stop them. I started asking myself questions I wasn't ready to answer. Did my parents truly believe in God, or was their faith just a tool to control me? Were they living for Him, or were they just following some script, afraid to admit they'd been wrong all along? Every service, every prayer, every forced smile made me feel further and further away from them, from the God they claimed to serve, and from the person they wanted me to be. And now, sitting here in this room that once felt like freedom, all I feel is trapped. Last week, I hit my breaking point. Sunday nights are supposed to be sacred in my parents' eyes, completely devoted to family, prayer, and their endless sermons about sin and redemption. No friends, no distractions, no excuses. But that night, my phone buzzed with a group text from Ashley. Headed to Megan's place to chill and smoke. "You in?" she wrote. I stared at the screen, feeling that familiar tug of rebellion. Sundays are lockdown days in my house, no exceptions. But the idea of being trapped here another second felt unbearable. Living in the basement does come with certain perks, though. Chief among them is the window, a quick escape route hidden behind the screen door. By 11 p.m., my parents were long asleep, their rhythmic snores echoing down through the floorboards. I slid the window open, carefully popped the screen out, and climbed out into the cool night air. The thrill of it hit me like a shot of adrenaline. As soon as I reached the alley behind the house, Ashley's car was waiting. I dove into the back seat like I'd just robbed a bank. "Hey, choir girl," Ashley said, smirking at me in the rearview mirror. "Just drive. Get me the hell out of here," I hissed, tapping her shoulder like a madwoman. We sped off, the tension lifting with every turn away from my house. By the time we pulled up to Megan's place, Ashley was rummaging through her bag. She pulled out a little baggie and fished out a pre-rolled joint. "If I'm gonna deal with Josh and Megan playing house all night, I need this," she muttered, sparking the lighter and taking a long, practiced drag. The smell hit me immediately, earthy, sharp, and completely foreign. I'd never been around anyone smoking before, let alone tried it myself. My instinct was to decline, but the night already felt like a turning point. "No, thanks," I said, waving her off. Ashley shrugged, taking another hit. "Suit yourself," she said, exhaling a plume of smoke into the night. We sat in her car for a few minutes, talking about nothing and everything. "Your parents still running their little dictatorship?" Ashley asked, flicking the ash out the window. "Oh, absolutely. The older I get, the more convinced they are that every time I leave the house, I'm out summoning demons or hosting some kind of orgy," I said, rolling my eyes. Ashley smirked. "I mean, not on Sundays at least," she shot back, cracking herself up. I couldn't help but laugh with her. The absurdity of it all, their paranoia, my double life, it felt almost comical in that moment. Then my gaze landed on the joint in her hand, now down to just a stub. "You know what?" I said, reaching out before I could second-guess myself. "I'm dead if I get caught anyway." Ashley's grin widened. "Look at my choir girl go. Go ahead, finish it." My treat. I took the joint and hesitated for a second. Then I inhaled, immediately regretting it. My throat felt like it was on fire, and I erupted into a coughing fit that left me gasping for air, my eyes watering like I'd just chopped an onion. Ashley howled with laughter. "Don't worry. Virgin lungs don't last forever." By the time we made it inside Megan's house, the weed had fully hit me. I don't remember much, just the feeling of sinking into the couch like it was swallowing me whole. My hoodie and leggings felt impossibly heavy, like I was wrapped in a weighted blanket, and every sound around me felt distant and strange. When Ashley dropped me off a block from my house hours later, the high had mostly faded, but the paranoia hadn't. I sniffed at my clothes and hair, desperately hoping the smell of weed hadn't clung to me. But as I turned the corner, my heart stopped. The living room light was still on. Panic set in, cold and sharp. My chest tightened, and my legs felt like they were sinking into the pavement. I stood there, frozen, staring at that glowing rectangle of doom. The house looked alive, like it was waiting for me to step inside so it could devour me. Every step toward the door felt heavier than the last. My mind raced with excuses, plans, prayers, anything to get me out of this alive. But deep down, I knew there was no talking my way out of this one. I spent the next 10 minutes pacing like a caged animal, my mind spinning in a whirlwind of panic and desperation. Every scenario I concocted ended with the same realization: I had no choice but to sneak back in through the window and hope they wouldn't notice. The air outside was heavy, pressing against me as I crept around to the backyard. I crouched low, avoiding the faint light spilling from the living room window. As I approached, I couldn't help but glance inside. What I saw froze me in my tracks. My father was pacing in his plaid pajamas, phone pressed to his ear. He rubbed the back of his neck so hard it looked like he might tear the skin. My mother was on the couch, her shoulders hunched, her face buried in her hands. She was sobbing, her lips moving silently in what I knew was prayer. The sight of her tears sent a pang of guilt so sharp it felt like a blade twisting in my chest. Whatever I'd done, it had shaken them to their core. My dad looked seconds away from breaking down himself. What the hell had I done? I tore my eyes away and climbed back through the basement window as quietly as I could, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away. Once inside, I flopped onto my bed, half expecting my door to burst open and my parents to unleash their fury. But minutes turned into hours, and the house stayed eerily silent. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. When I woke up, the air felt wrong. Stale. Still. I stretched out, half-heartedly reaching for my phone, but then I froze. Something was missing. The stairs. The door to the living room and the staircase that connected me to the rest of the house were gone. I bolted upright, staring in disbelief. Where there should have been a doorway and a flight of stairs, there was now nothing but smooth, unbroken hardwood, blending seamlessly into the floor. My breath caught in my throat. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the spot, pounding on the ground as if I could force the stairs to reappear through sheer willpower. How does a staircase disappear overnight? How does a door just vanish? I racked my brain for any logical explanation, but there was none. The weight of the impossibility pressed on me like a suffocating blanket, and panic clawed its way into my chest. The window. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt. I spun around and leapt onto my bed, yanking at the window with all my strength. My hand slipped and burned against the cold frame, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I saw it. The edges of the window pane were fused, sealed with a jagged line of metal. Welded shut. A scream tore from my throat before I even realized I was screaming. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a lamp, and hurled it at the glass. It bounced off harmlessly, leaving no mark. Next, I tried my alarm clock, my desk chair, even the solid oak nightstand, slamming it against the glass with everything I had. Nothing. Not even a scratch. I sank to the floor, my chest heaving, tears streaming down my face. I screamed until my throat burned, until my voice cracked and faded into a hoarse whisper. "Mom. Dad. Help me. I'm trapped." The silence that followed was deafening. My phone was useless, no service, no Wi-Fi. The TV played only static, and my DVD collection of old movies felt like a cruel joke. There was nothing to eat, no food in the basement at all, and my only water source was the bathroom sink. Hours passed like a slow, torturous drip. I paced the room endlessly, stopping only to shout for help or throw myself at the window again. Then I saw her. A figure passed by the window, and for a split second, hope flared in my chest. I rushed to the glass, pressing my face against it, banging with both fists. It was my mom. She was sitting in one of the backyard chairs, her shoulders slumped, her hands clasped in her lap. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face streaked with tears. "Mom." I screamed, my fists pounding on the glass with a force that made my arms ache. "Mom, I'm here. Help me." She didn't even flinch. "Mom. Please. I'm trapped." Nothing. She sat there, staring blankly ahead as though she couldn't hear me, as though I wasn't even there. My fist slid down the glass, and I sank to my knees. The spark of hope inside me flickered and died. Did they do this? The thought came unbidden, creeping into my mind like a shadow. Did my parents trap me down here? Is that why she was crying? But why? What kind of parents would do this to their child? I spent the rest of the day pacing, the questions chasing each other in endless circles through my mind. By nightfall, exhaustion overtook me, but I couldn't bring myself to lie down. Instead, I sat on the floor, staring at the spot where the stairs used to be, hoping, praying, it was all a nightmare. Maybe they were teaching me a lesson. Maybe this was their way of making sure I'd never sneak out again, never touch weed, never defy them. I closed my eyes, willing the morning to come and bring some shred of normalcy with it. Surely, they'd let me out by then. Surely, this couldn't be real. When I woke up the next morning, the dread hit me like a freight train. The stairs were still gone. For a moment, I clung to the hope that maybe I'd wake up and find everything back to normal. But one look at the flat, featureless floor where the stairs used to be crushed that fragile hope. I staggered to the window, pressing my face to the glass. The yard looked the same, silent, unmoving. The old patio furniture sat exactly where it always had, rusted and faded from years of sun and rain. But there was no one. No mom. No dad. Nothing. That's when I noticed the clocks. Every single one, on the walls, on my phone, had frozen. All of them stopped at exactly 3:33 a.m., their hands unmoving as if time itself had given up on me. It was a cruel joke. Without clocks, the only way I could tell time was by watching the sunrise and sunset through the window. And even that began to feel meaningless, like a slow drip of sand in an infinite hourglass. I screamed again. I screamed until my throat was raw, until the sound became a rasping whisper. But it didn't matter. No one came. I've never known panic like that. It felt like waking up in the aftermath of a car crash, the world spinning, the ground slipping out from beneath me. Every breath was a struggle, my chest tightening as though I were suffocating under some invisible weight. And then came the rage. The kind of rage that burns so hot it blots out everything else. I grabbed my battered nightstand, its legs already cracked from my earlier attempts, and hurled it at the wall where the door used to be. The crash echoed through the room, splintering the nightstand further, but the wall stood unscathed. Again. And again. I flung the broken pieces with everything I had, screaming with each swing. Let me out. Let me out. But the wall didn't so much as flinch. Not a dent, not a chip. Eventually, my strength gave out. I slumped against the wall, my body trembling with exhaustion, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The room, once my sanctuary, now felt like a cruel, sentient prison. Every corner seemed to mock me, every shadow seemed alive with malice. The silence pressed in like a suffocating blanket. For the rest of the day, I lay in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. I put on one of the old DVDs from my shelf, the screen flickering with a vintage movie that no longer brought me any comfort. The characters' smiles felt hollow, their laughter distant and cruel. The next day, or what I thought was the next day, I spent hours staring out the window. The leaves had turned orange and gold, fluttering to the ground in the crisp air. It was fall now. But when I was trapped, it had been the middle of summer. How had the seasons changed overnight? The realization hit me like a thunderclap, time wasn't moving normally anymore. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Every time I blinked, it felt like I lost another chunk of my life. But was it really life? What kind of existence was this? Just a lab rat in a cage, forgotten by whoever, or whatever, was watching. From my warped sense of time, I calculated that I'd been here for 25,430 sunsets. Years had passed. Decades. I had no hunger, no thirst. The bathroom sink worked, but I no longer needed it. My body didn't weaken, didn't age. I was trapped in a timeless limbo. Through the window, I saw people I didn't recognize wandering through the backyard. New families, their children playing where I used to. My parents were long gone. Dead. It had been decades since they'd last set foot in this house, but for me, it was yesterday. I used to shout, beg for help. I'd cry out to the strangers passing by, pounding on the glass until my fists were raw. But no one ever noticed me. The window might as well have been a screen showing a pre-recorded image, some cruel simulation designed to taunt me. I stopped praying. At first, I prayed out of desperation. But as time dragged on, I realized something chilling: if there was a God, he wasn't listening. Or worse, he was. Maybe I wasn't forgotten. Maybe I was being watched, studied, tormented. What kind of deity traps someone in a prison like this? If this was punishment, what sin was so great it warranted this eternal solitude? I started to hear whispers. At first, they were faint, barely audible over the deafening silence. But they grew louder, filling the room with a low, guttural hum. I couldn't tell where they were coming from. The walls? The floor? My own mind? They spoke in a language I couldn't understand, yet their tone was unmistakable, cruel, mocking, inhuman. And then, one day, or maybe one eternity, I woke up to find the window gone. The last connection I had to the outside world was erased. Now, I sit here in total darkness, surrounded by nothing but the whispers. They've grown louder, more insistent. Sometimes I think I can make out words, but they're twisted and alien, like a voice distorted through a broken radio. I've stopped counting sunsets. Time means nothing here. I've accepted the truth. This isn't about sneaking out. It's not about my parents. This is something bigger, something ancient and cruel. I'm not a prisoner. I'm an offering.